What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today we are back with another episode of Get Ready With Me, which is my book club series here on this makeup based channel. Today we are going to be discussing the first third, not half this time, third of A Court of Wings and Ruin, which is the third book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas, which we have been reading through here on this channel for a couple of months now. I am so deeply engrossed in this book series at this point. I'm actually really glad that you guys, for the most part, said that you wanted to continue this series through to the end before we start something else. So this book of the three is the longest one so far, which is why I decided to put it in 3 parts instead of 2, because I wanted to make sure that I don't go over an hour with these videos, because first of all, I don't know that I'm entirely capable of talking for that long without losing it. And also, I think that's a lot to ask of you guys to sit for longer than that. So that's what I'm going to try to do. Let me know what you think. Today, rather than using a new palette, I am going back and playing with the Melt Impulsive palette. I already did a 3 looks video on this palette, so if you would like to see that or a review of it, if that's what you're looking for, I'll link that right here on the screen. As always, I will leave all of the products that I use on my face down below, and I'll also have a title card up on the screen every time I switch products, so that way you guys know exactly what I'm using if you would like to recreate this look. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you want me to continue doing more of them, because every little bit of encouragement helps when you start a new series on a channel like this. And don't forget to subscribe, because I would love to have you stick around for future versions of these videos. I think that's all we need to discuss before we get into it. Oh, also, this t-shirt matches so well with the green from this palette. I will link this down below too if I could find it, because I found this at Target for $8 the other day and I'm kind of obsessed with this color. Okay, I think that's all we need to talk about before we get into it. So let's just jump into the makeup and chapter 1 of A Court of Wings and Ruin. So let's talk about where we left off in this story. When we finished the last book, Feyre had just tricked Hybern and his cronies, who unfortunately include Tamlin and Lucien, into thinking that she was under a spell the whole time that made her pretend that she loved Rhys and wanted to be with him and not Tamlin, and wound up leaving Hybern with Tamlin and Lucien under the guise that she was going back to live with them. In reality, she was going back to spy on them, because old Hambone over there, which is what we call Tamlin in this house now, just FYI. So this book starts off with a recent point of view, not chapter, just like a little intro. It details about the first war that Rhys was involved in, and it describes him after one of the battles is over and his dad had separated him and Cassian and Azriel into different legions. So he was going through piles of bodies trying to find if Cassian and Azriel had been killed. And it seems to me that this little intro is kind of meant to be a setup to like really paint the picture of how horrible a war will be if and when it does come. So chapter 1. Feyre is painting at the spring court. She's really like full on in character, pretending to be this maiden who was just, she was so glad to be back with her Tamlin. But deep down, well, not even deep down, right under the surface actually, she hates him. So her plot here is not just to spy on them, but also she's looking to find a way to cause Tamlin's court to fall apart around him. As she's painting, Tamlin comes in and asks her if she's ready for their meeting, because they're supposed to meet with Ianthe, and it will be the first time that she sees Ianthe since she betrayed them and brought her sisters to Hybern, which, in case you forgot, meant that Hybern dipped her sisters in the cauldron. Now, the whole time you could tell Lucien suspects that Feyre is faking it. Feyre's sister is Lucien's mate. He runs the risk of pissing her off, and then he's never gonna get anywhere near her sisters. They also show that while she was gone, Tamlin shredded her old bedroom into pieces, which, can he just stop? Lucien also asks her a bunch of questions about where Rhys has Elaine, and Feyre's like, I don't know, but I know that she's safe, and he doesn't buy it because in his mind, Rhysand's a monster. So they meet with Ianthe, and Ianthe spins a beautiful web of bullshit, which is to be expected of her. Lucien saw it coming, so did Feyre. Feyre pretends that she goes along with it, but only because she's like plotting and stuff Tamlin really kind of buys it because, quite frankly, he's an idiot. The day after this meeting, they are supposed to be getting some visitors, including, but not limited to, Durian. She's worried that it's weird that Lucian and Tamlin don't seem to care at all that they're working with Durian, who, in her eyes, has gone completely mad. While she's in the spring court, it seems odd that her bond with Reese, it seems like everything is more distant. Like she's a little bit more disconnected from the bond. Everything seems quieter and like takes a long time to get a response from him and stuff. It's almost like a bad telephone connection. So Durian shows up and he's got two Highburn commanders with them. The commanders are twins. They're Highburn's niece and nephew, and their names are Dagden and Branna. So they are a prince and princess of Highburn. So not just any commanders, like the commanders. Feyre suspects from watching them and how they interact that they may be Daemati, like she is, which is the name for the type of fairies who can read people's minds and like control other people's minds and stuff. So she's extra suspicious of them right off the bat. Well, not that she wasn't suspicious of them anyway because they work for Highburn, but she's like extra careful because she knows that they could be being up to some sneaky shit. They want to be brought to the wall to see where there are holes in the wall, to study it and figure out a way that they can bring it down more easily. So they'll go to the wall with Feyre and Lucian and they'll show them where there's a hole, starting with the one that Feyre came through originally. They sit down to lunch with the visitors and Feyre notices that the two of them are definitely speaking mind to mind, and she reaches out with her little mental tendrils and finds that they are out there with their little mental tendrils creeping around trying to get into the minds of everyone over lunch. So she is expending tons of mental energy trying to shield everyone else's mind from them because the rest of them don't know that this is going on. The people who are not Daemati can't tell that their minds are being infiltrated, so they're like completely unaware, and Feyre has to try to shield them all and herself from these two creeps. And they are creeps, by the way, that's confirmed. So Feyre and Lucian bring the two royals to the wall. And while they're out there, Feyre makes it a point to flirt with Lucian a little bit. She does it strategically to make sure that other people see it because she wants it to get back to Tamlin because she's trying to create distrust between Tamlin and Lucian. Part of her sneaky plan to bring down the whole spring court. Lucian definitely knows something is up though, because at one point he even turns to Feyre and says, whatever you're planning, it's gonna get us in some deep shit. And on the way back to the manor, Lucian reveals that when Colin Mai had passed, which is that springtime celebration where Tamlin has to go into a cave with one of the fairies to like fertilize the lands by having sex with her, that had passed and Tamlin had outright refused to take part in it. So Lucian had taken his place in the ritual, which is interesting because it's supposed to only be somebody who has the powers of a High Lord who can take part in that. So, little note there. Now, Lucian is definitely suspicious of Feyre and her motives here, but somebody else who catches on too is Alice. Alice, when she's getting Feyre dressed, notices that Feyre, when she was with Tamlin in the spring court and having a very hard time, she had wasted away to almost nothing. Suspiciously enough, she came back from the night court looking healthy and thick. How'd that happen? Alice brings up that she remembers when Moore showed up to take Feyre away and how it was very clear that not only did Feyre completely trust Moore when she realized it was her, but that Moore loved Feyre and was willing to like throw down with everybody in that manor to get her out of there. And she says to Feyre, whatever it is you plan to do, please just don't let my boys get hurt. And Feyre swears that she's not up to anything, but she assures her that she would never hurt her boys. So spring solstice runs around and Ianthe insists that they have like this dawn sunrise ceremony. The whole reason behind this dawn ceremony is really just to make her look powerful and godlike in front of all the people of the spring court. And Feyre, knowing this because she was the one who planned the whole day with Ianthe, finds a way to make it wind up looking like the gods have blessed her instead of Ianthe. So she like strategically stands in a spot where the sun rises behind her and like lights her up like a glowing goddess, and everybody drops to their knees, including Lucian, and like bows to her. And Ianthe is so pissed. So the solstice party is very similar to the one that Feyre was at the year before, even though she's in a very different place emotionally and romantically with Tamlin than she was the last time she was there, because the last year's solstice, if you recall, is actually the first time that her and Tamlin ever even kissed. So she knows that she can like play up the whole idea of the day to make Tamlin like really think that she's into him again, but she's got to use it strategically because A, she's got things to do and a whole court to bring down, and B, she's obviously not gonna like make out with him and sleep with him because she's married to Rhys now. I'm pretty sure my eyebrows are two completely different shapes today, but what can you do? So she walks up to Tamlin at the party and she says, "Do you want to dance with me?" That night she goes to bed early from the solstice because she doesn't want to be around for like all of the romantic stuff that her and Tamlin did the year before. She knows that if she's there, like he's gonna try to, you know, rope her into those romantic situations again. So she leaves to go back to the manor pretty early, and Lucian wants to go back early too because he's a mated male now. He's only interested in Elaine, so he doesn't want none of that romance stuff anyway. But Feyre is a plotting ass bitch, let me tell you. I don't know when she developed like these double agent super spy skills, but my goodness, she's really freaking got this all down to a science at this point. So she goes to her bed and purposely puts on a scandalous little skint nightgown, and then purposely makes herself think about the horrors that she's been through, to the point where she breaks into a sweat and looks disheveled, and she tosses her sheets, and she literally works herself into a panic on purpose just so that she could get up, go to Lucian's room and tell him that she had a nightmare about Under the Mountain. And then in her little sexy nightgown, she like falls into Lucian's arms for comfort and support, knowing, because she left snares of magic in the hallway, that Tamlin was coming and was gonna catch them so she can further drive a wedge between Lucian and Tamlin. What a calculating, ooh. But it works because Tamlin is very suspicious and not pleased at all. The keys to one of the estate gates have gone missing. Everybody's a little bit too hungover the next morning to worry about it though. Everybody's at breakfast, they're all feeling really rough from the day before, and Ianthe comes breezing in with an important announcement because, oh my, she just can't believe such a horrible thing has happened. And she tells them all about how her lands are dying, like all of the plants apparently are just half dead and she doesn't know why. And she clearly does this to try to like gain attention back after Feyre stole her thunder at the dawn ritual thing. Everyone there, including the people from Hybern, basically laugh her out of the room and tell her that it's a case for the groundspeople. So they take the two Hybern royals to see the second hole in the wall. This time it's a little bit further away, so they have to spend the night in the woods when they get there. So Feyre plans it out so that she winds up sleeping in a tent with Lucian to add to her little ruse to see if she can cause that rift between Lucian and Tamlin. She asks Lucian if there's any way that they can get out of the deal with Hybern now that Tamlin has her back, and Lucian tells her no, because it was like a bargain made with magic, sort of like the way that hers was with Rhysand when she had made it, and that if they didn't wind up respecting the bargain, that it could cost them their lives. She also runs into Princess Branna by the stream in the morning when they're both freshening up, and Branna says to her that she would have picked Lucian over Tamlin too, which first of all means that Feyre's little ruse is working, but also is so funny. When they get to the wall, they're assessing the entrance and the size of it, and it's very, very small, and just as they get there, they run into three children of the Blessed. Dagden and Branna, the two creepos that they are, want to seduce the humans sexually and then basically eat them. And Feyre, because she's also Demati, knows that this is going to happen. She can tell exactly what they're trying to do. Feyre tries to tell them with her mouth to get out of there and leave and go back to the human realm, but they don't listen because they're brainwashed. So she uses her mental powers to convince them and show them the horrors that wait for them on this side of the wall, and they wind up running away, and Dagden and Branna are pissed. It was like as if Feyre took away their lunch. So they have to spend another night in the woods, and Feyre ends up sitting by the fire with Durian, which, oh God, I wouldn't want to do that. He seems like very unpleasant to be around. But he reveals that he still wants to protect humans and is still on the side of humans in this whole war. And she's like, well, why are you working with Hybern then? And basically he says that he had to take the deal because it was the only way for him to get brought back to life, and he's only working with Hybern so that he can get back at Miriam. Feyre still insists that Miriam is dead, but Durian does not believe. Durian also lets it slip that he's very much aware that Rhysand is not a monster, and he is very much onto Feyre as well as far as what she's trying and what she's planning to do here. The next morning, Feyre wakes up in the tent with Lucian's hand over her mouth. Before she even gets up, she could already smell blood, so she knows that there's definitely some seriously fucked up things happening. So they get out of the tent and they run in the direction of the smell of the blood, and Durian's there and he says, "You're already way too late. They finished hours ago." And that's when they see that Dagden and Branna had gone through the wall and chased down those children of the Blessed and had torn them into bloody smithereens. Feyre and Lucian are pissed because not only is it super wrong what they did, but they also feel like it's a bit of a power play because they're in Feyre and Lucian's lands and they were told not to do that and to leave them alone, and they went and they did it anyway. So we jump to the following evening when they're back at the manor, and Hamlin is pissed. He is so mad because apparently in order to get back at the twins, Feyre and Lucian had gone into the woods and lured the bogey, who, if you don't recall, is a horrible murderous creature that lives in the woods, lured the bogey back to the camp and then had set it after the twins. And honestly, they freaking deserved it. Lucian leaves the room and Feyre uses this as her opportunity to bait Tamlin. So she argues with him until he gets super angry, and she knows what Tamlin does at this point, and she knows that he's going to do his old explode the room in a big fat baby rage maneuver. So when Lucian hears the ruckus and comes back into the room, he's like, "What have you done?" And the whole court and all of the sentries and everybody sees that he essentially hit Feyre. So Lucian like wraps his arms around her and takes her away and comforts her, and basically she really makes Tamlin look like a freaking monster. Although, you know what? He made himself look like a monster. He's been doing this, you know what I mean? And as soon as she's alone, Rhys contacts her because he felt like the moment of terror through the bond and wants to make sure that she's okay. And she's like, all a part of the plan, BB, don't even worry about it. But again, at this moment, she feels like the bond feels especially difficult to contact him through. And she also notices that she's healing because fairies heal very quickly, but not quite as quickly as she normally would. Tamlin begs her to forgive him, and because she's playing him, she says that she does. Lucian won't even speak to him, so that part of her plan worked out perfectly. That night, in the middle of the night, 7 Naga, which are the creatures that had almost killed her in the first book out in the woods, break into the manor, and they're alerted immediately by Ianthe. The Naga had been able to break into the manor because they somehow had the keys to the gate. The ones that had gone missing the day before, but everybody was a little bit too hungover to question it in the morning. So Ianthe suspiciously seems like she wants credit for having warned everybody that the Naga were invading the manor. Feyre knew that this was going to happen. She saw this coming in advance. Ianthe has Tamlin string up the sentry who had lost the keys to the gate, and she wants him to sentence him to 20 lashes. But Feyre had planned and plotted all of this to begin with, so she frees up the sentry's mind, which Ianthe had put a little spell on him to make him think that he fell asleep and lost the keys, when really Ianthe went and took the keys from him and gave them to the Naga just to take the credit for telling them when the Naga would break in. So Feyre frees up his mind, and as he's strung up waiting for his lashes with all of his brethren and the people of the court around them, he starts telling his side of the story that Ianthe came and took the keys from him and this was all her plot all along. Now Tamlin is either left to side with the High Priestess or side with one of his sentries, part of Feyre's plot as well. As predicted, Tamlin sides with Ianthe and doles out these 20 lashes to one of his sentries who's willing to give his life for him to protect his manor. All of the other sentries absolutely hate him for it. I don't know when Feyre learned all this double agent shit, but she's really good at it. And to play into this whole scenario even more, Feyre goes and helps them take the sentry and heal him and dress his wounds, and she like bonds with them, and by the time she leaves, she knows that she has all of Tamlin's sentries wrapped around her finger. So they're gonna need to go back to the wall a third time because there are 3 holes in the wall within Tamlin's lands. The third one being the furthest away, so it's going to be a couple of days trip, and Hamlin and Ianthe are going to join them this time. Feyre is getting ready to leave. Alice is helping her out, and Alice gives her an extra bag of supplies and basically tells her goodbye and says that she's going back to the summer court. And I think that the reason she does this, even though they don't explicitly say so, is because she knows exactly what Feyre is doing. But when Feyre hears that Alice is going back to the summer court, she's like, listen, you can't tell anybody there that you know me well because of the blood rubies. And when Feyre tells her about the blood ruby, Alice says you'll always have at least one friend at the summer court. So on the way to the third hole in the wall, they can't get everybody there in a timely fashion because there's not enough of them that can winnow in order to like get everybody there. So they have to like walk a little bit in between, and it takes a while. Feyre is chilling by the fire, eating an apple, happy as a clam. Well, I don't know if she's happy as a clam, but she's doing well. She's having a conversation with the 2 twins. And in this conversation, she gets the 2 dum-dums to reveal all of the numbers regarding Hybern's armies, how many men they have, who's working with them, where they are, where the armies are stationed, who's in alliance with them. But now that Feyre has that information, she doesn't need to be there anymore. So she's like, all right, well, I'm out here in the woods and it's time for me to make my escape. She's got the information, the court's in shambles, she's done what she's had to do, and it's time to go home. So she straps a couple of knives to her belt and starts winnowing for home. Once she gets out into the woods, she overhears Ianthe and Lucian's voices. So she goes toward them and she finds Ianthe has Lucian strapped to a tree with those blue stone chains that they had used on Rhys when he was in the cave to nullify his powers. She's about to sexually assault Lucian in the woods, and Feyre is just like, bitch, no, I can't leave Lucian here like this. So Feyre uses her mental powers to invade Ianthe's mind. She makes Ianthe unshackle Lucian, and then she makes her pick up a rock and smash her own hand with the rock. Smash it until the bones are broken and the skin is shredded off into pieces. Like, she really, really makes her do some hideous shit. She implants the idea into Ianthe's mind that she will never be able to touch another person again unless they initiate it first. But she makes it so that she will have to leave the scars there as a reminder, even though she won't know exactly why it reminds her of that. And just as she's done, just as she's about to hightail it out of there with Lucian, Dagden and Branna find them. So when the twins stumble upon them in the woods to see what has happened, they not only want to stop Feyre from leaving, but they want to kill Lucian. They also reveal that the reason that Feyre's powers have felt hard to use and that her bond with Freeze has felt quiet and distant is because they have been poisoning her since they got there with something called Faebane. Now, essentially, it's a rock that stops fairies' powers. So what they had done was ground it up and put it in her food little by little so that she wouldn't be too suspicious, but that it would build up in her system. And the final nail in the coffin was the apple that she had been eating at the camp. Now, the apple had been specially grown where they fed the apple trees with water that was laced with Faebane powder. So basically the whole apple was just filled with the stuff. Enough so that once it takes effect, which Dagden says should be any moment now, it'll knock Farah's powers out for several days. At this point, Farah has resigned herself that she's not leaving without Lucien, and essentially the two of them collectively kick the shit out of Dagden and Branna and wind up killing both of them and leaving them in the woods. Farah hadn't wanted to leave Lucien there just to let him die, but she also hadn't planned on bringing him back to the Night Court with her. But once she goes to leave, Lucien insists on coming, and she should have seen that coming because obviously he wants to go be with Elaine. So she reluctantly winds up leaving with Lucien and bringing him with her to go back to the Night Court, which I have been waiting for, because as soon as I started to realize how much I didn't like Tamlin in the last book or the end of the first book, I was like, I really need Lucien to get out of there. I really need them to find a way where Lucien jumps ship and goes to the Night Court, because the Spring Court just sucks. So they leave and they make it to the foothills north of the Spring Court. But at that point, both of their powers are completely gone. You know that they're going to have a very hard time making it without their power, but they have to find a way to at least get out of the Spring Court for now. So they decide to use one of the doors, which we talked about before. It's like these secret caves that if you walk through them, it's like a portal to another area. So there's one that goes to under the mountain, and there's a few that go to the different courts, but there are none that go directly to the Night Court. They could either go to the Summer Court where there's a hit out on Farah, or go to the Autumn Court where Lucien's family lives and they want to kill both of them. So they decide to go to the Autumn Court because from the Autumn Court they can try to skirt around Lucien's family and walk their way closer to the Night Court, which is north of it. And as they go to pass through the door and go into the Autumn Court, they hear a roar in the distance and they know that Tamlin had discovered what they had done and that they were gone. So they cross through this cave into the Autumn Court, and quite frankly, the way they describe the Autumn Court sounds so nice. Like, Lucien's family is the worst, but as far as like what the seasons are like and what the actual landscape is like, I would love to live in the Autumn Court. Just like imagine always having cool, crisp weather and always having beautiful trees and apples. Like, how can you go wrong? Lucien tells her that he knew that she was lying from the moment they left Highburn, and that he didn't say anything because he wanted to be able to be with Elaine if he could, which we already knew. He didn't have to even say it. He does seem upset with her that she betrayed the entire court that way, and he says, "What was your plan for me before Ianthe interfered?" And she just says, "You would have been fine." So he knows that she wasn't planning on bringing him with her. So they walk north for 5 days. For the most part, they don't talk a ton because they're a little bit mad at each other, and also they're trying not to be seen. But Lucien does reveal at one point that he is meant to be his father's heir, because although he is the 7th of his sons, it doesn't really work the way it does in the human world as far as heirs are concerned. The one who inherits the father's lordship is the one who is developing the powers of a High Lord. Which is why I said before to make note that Lucien seems to have the powers of a High Lord. He also explains that the commoners in his father's lands hate him as well, and they have to avoid them because they will turn him in. Because the lesser fairy that Lucien had fallen in love with and was killed by his father was one of them, and they feel that Lucien failed her and that Lucien is the reason that she's dead, and so the commoners in his father's lands hate him too. So as they're about to leave the cave, they're so close to the Winter Court border. Lucien's brothers find them in the cave. The first thing they say to them is, "We heard a rumor that you guys cuckolded Tamlin," which I don't know about Imprythian, but in 2019 on the internet, that's just about the meanest thing you could say about a person. From there, all hell breaks loose and Lucian's brothers try to kill them. They escape the cave and Feyre's magic is starting to come back a little bit. So together, her and Lucian use their powers to make a wall of flame and also to collapse the entrance of the cave to trap the brothers inside so they can't get them. But it doesn't work. They do get away, but the brothers don't get trapped inside the cave. They make their way into another cave and settle down for the night. They can't make a fire, they have no source of warmth, so the two of them just huddle together and hope for the best. And at this point, she tries to use her bond to reach Rhys and asks for help, but she still can't reach him through the bond. They leave their cave in the morning and they set out north, and they have to travel over this area that is like 90% just frozen lakes, and there's really no way around it, and it's super dangerous. They make it over the border into the Winter Court, and they think they're safe from Lucian's brothers at this point. But as they're crossing this frozen lake, this expanse of lake that they literally can't see the end of, Eris finds them again. The power of the Autumn Court is fire, which I don't get that. Like, it doesn't seem like the right power, but I guess, like, I don't know, color-wise it makes sense. Like the colors of fire and the colors of autumn, I don't know. So Eris starts melting the ice under their feet. And at this point, Feyre is just like, damn, I don't care if they see my powers. I'm gonna use them to the full extent of my abilities because we're not getting out of here otherwise. So she starts to use her powers to refreeze the ice underneath them. She makes a really valiant effort, and so does Lucian, but Eris still catches them. He has Feyre in his grasp, and he's basically about to just stab her or something. And just as she thinks all hope is lost, who shows up but Cassian? Right behind Cassian comes Azriel. She remembers what Cassian taught her about escaping somebody's grasp. And she winds up twisting her way out of Eris's grip, even though he like bound her with like bands of fire on her wrists and her arms. She winds up she gives him like a really swift kick in the dick, which is okay. That's one way to get out of a grasp. And once Cassian completely gets her free and she's safe with him and Azriel, she announces herself as High Lady of the Night Court, and they kind of back off because that's more trouble than they were counting on. I also don't think they want to tangle with Cassian and Azriel because those two are a force to be reckoned with, if you will. So Cassian and Azriel pick them up and fly them back to the Night Court where they're safe. When they get back, Mor is waiting for them, and she says that Rhys is on his way. He was very far away, and then they leave to go meet him at the townhouse. So she's really stoked to be back in Velaris, but Lucian is really confused. The Night Court is supposed to all be like the Court of Nightmares to him, so he's like completely shook that it is the way that it is. When they get to the townhouse, she sees Rhys and she just collapses onto the floor in complete relief that she finally gets to be with him again. Rhys sends everybody away out of the house, and they all think it's because they're gonna go upstairs and like bang like crazy, which eventually they do, but really he just wanted some time with her alone to reconnect. He draws her a bath, they discuss everything that happened while she was gone. He, of course, being the gentleman that he always is, says some really cute shit about how he missed her in his bed, but he more missed her as his friend. At this point, they don't really know what to do with Lucian. He's just kind of hanging around with them. And then Feyre decides that it's time to take Lucian to the House of Wind to try to go and see her sisters. Into the House of Wind, she sits and talks with Lucian for a little bit because she kind of wants to size up where his head is at about everything. And Lucian says, this is not at all what I expected. So she takes that time to literally tell Lucian her side of the story from start to finish. And then she brings in Rhysand to tell his side of the story from start to finish, much in the way that he did with her when they were up in the cabin. Lucian is understandably confused because in his own words, he saw Rhysand do terrible things. But the terrible things were like a cover the whole time, and he can believe it now because he sees all the wonderful stuff that Rhys has done in this city. He also seemed really upset because he realizes that in Feyre's telling of her story, he seems like a villain, and he didn't realize that that was the role that he was playing. Feyre goes to see her sisters first. Nesta's in the library reading a book. She's very angry about everything, but physically and for the most part emotionally, she seems like she's okay. Elaine, on the other hand, is not doing well. She won't eat, she won't drink water, she's super pale, and she just sits in her room and stares out the window all the time and says that she wants to go home. They also make it very clear in this chapter, Cassian has been going to the house every other day, the excuse being that he's trying to re-strengthen his wings after he's healing, but really he just wants to go see Nesta, and he's been trying to go there every couple of days to try to see if he can get her to train, because he believes A, that she should be training physically anyway, just for safety reasons, and also he saw what Feyre saw when she came out of the cauldron, and he knows that she's got a lot of power and that she needs to know how to use it. But so far, she won't speak of power at all, and she won't train with him at all, and she acts like she hates him, even though I don't think she does, and it's very, very clear at this point that he's into her. So they give Lucien a suite of rooms to stay in. They also give him some clean clothes, and they tell him for the time being, stay away from the two sisters. They go to Amren's apartment, and Amren has been there for the last little while Feyre was away, trying to decode the Book of Breathings now that both halves are together. Now that both halves are together, the book has developed a habit of speaking quite a bit, and Amren says that I just got so much powder all over my shirt, oh my god. Amren says that the book is speaking mostly nonsense, but it seems more like the book speaks in a bit of a code. At Amren's apartment, they've discussed everything that Feyre found out while she was in the Spring Court, and all of the intel that she brought back lines up with what they had gleaned from their spyings while she was gone. So now they have all of the information they need, and essentially what Rhysand's plan is to gather a meeting of all of the High Lords to try to get them to fight together. All of the High Lords include Tamlin and Tarquin, which is a problem. Feyre also finds out that while she was gone, they went to try to find Miriam and Draken for help, and when they got there, the island was completely abandoned and in ruin. They discuss with Amren that either Feyre or either of her sisters might be able to patch up the holes in the wall because of the fact that they are essentially made by the cauldron. Amren agrees that she will train Nesta in order to teach Nesta how to use her powers if Nesta will agree to it, so that she might be able to help them patch up the wall. While they're there, Rhys makes a comment that he doesn't think Valaris is ready for Nesta Archeron, and Feyre snaps at him so quick and so crazy. But I think from his pattern of behavior, she could have interpreted it a little differently. Like, she knows that he would never purposely try to insult her sister, and she knows he would never intentionally say something that he thought was overstepping boundaries, and that he was just kind of joshing around a little bit. Once she snaps at him, I think she realizes that she kind of took it over the top a little bit, and she feels really bad. But Rhys kind of just takes it in stride. So they stay at Amren's apartment for quite a while until they all get a little bit too hungry and they decide to go back to the House of Wind for dinner. Nesta also comes to dinner, which is surprising to all of them because she was very standoffish when they got there. Mor, being the girlfriendy type that she is, immediately goes over and compliments Nesta's dress first and foremost, which this is when we find out that all of these bomb dresses are from Rhys. He picks them out and keeps secret stores that nobody else knows about where he gets all these really nice dresses from. But instead of accepting the compliment, Nesta is so rude. Nesta needs to relax a little bit with that kind of thing, in my opinion, but it's okay. I forgive her because she's been through a lot of shit. Feyre also intentionally talks about going to train with Cassian in the morning in front of Nesta because she wants Nesta to join them. She also says that she wants to learn how to fly because she can shapeshift and grow Illyrian wings, so she figures that if she learns how to fly, she'll have a bit more of an advantage in the upcoming war. Asriel insists that he should be the one to train her because Asriel grew up with really bad parents and they were very, very mean to him, and they didn't teach him to fly until he went off to the Illyrian war camps when he was like 10 years old, which is apparently very, very late for an Illyrian to learn how to fly. They also need to go to the Court of Nightmares because they need to get Moor's dad, Kier, to get on board with the whole war thing with them because he has a legion of fighters called the Darkbringers, and they're under his control because he rules over that part of Rhys's territory. Moor doesn't approve because she hates her family, but it's gotta be done. While they're at dinner, Feyre asks if Nesta would be willing to learn how to close the holes in the wall. She agrees to do it on the condition that either during the war or after, they will kill the 5 human queens. So the plan is that Amren is going to bring her with them to the Court of Nightmares because there's a ton of objects of power there that Nesta can practice on to see if she'll be able to close up the hole in the wall. At this point, nobody's quite sure if the human queens were transformed and put in the cauldron or not. They're hoping that they weren't. After dinner, Rhys asks Feyre to go for a walk with him, just the 2 of them through the city, and they go. And Feyre apologizes for snapping at him. And in their discussion, they both agree that they should definitely always call each other on their bullshit, but that they probably shouldn't undermine one another in public either. But Rhys is really adamant that he wants Feyre to challenge him when she thinks it's necessary, and she asks him to do the same for her, which I personally think is a very healthy way to behave, because if the people around us can't challenge us and help us become better versions of ourselves, that is a good way to never grow. So Feyre meets Cassian the next morning at 8 a.m. to train, and she realizes when she gets there that she didn't notice since she's been back because they haven't really spent much time together, but Cass is pissed at her. The reason that he's pissed is because she didn't tell them what she was doing and what her plan was. And when she went to the spring court without any of them, he was terrified because that was exactly what Rhysand had done when Amarantha had taken him under the mountain, and Cassian had had a really hard time dealing with that. Much to Feyre's surprise, Nesta actually shows up to train. Her and Cassian are already bickering quite a bit, so she calls Rhys on her little mind phone and tells him that she can't deal with the bickering, and he sends Azriel to come get her early for their flying lessons. He goes off into the woods near a lake with Azriel to learn how to fly, and it's a lot harder than she was expecting. She can't even lift the wings off the ground, never mind fly with them. So after they get back to the House of Wind, Rhys takes her downstairs and shows her the family library. The family library sounds so cool. The library is built into the mountain and the levels spiral down into the abyss. At the bottom levels of the spiral, like, nobody knows what's down there, and Rhys had once dared Cassian to fly down and see what was there, and when Cass flew back up faster than he's ever seen him fly before in his life, he was so terrified of what he saw that he literally wouldn't tell him, and it's been 200 years and he still has never told him what he saw down there. They're greeted in the library by a priestess whose name is Clotho, and Clotho is completely nonverbal, and she's not sure if all of the priestesses are completely nonverbal or if it's just Clotho, but everyone in the library is very, very silent. As Clotho leads them down through the levels of the library, Rhys speaks to Feyre mind to mind and explains to her that Clotho is one of many very special priestesses that work in his library and live there. And what he has essentially done is made the library into a refuge for priestesses who have been abused, which seems to be, unfortunately, more common than one would think. I'm sorry I'm ducking out of camera, I'm just trying to glue my lashes on. So Rhys explains that Clotho had been attacked and assaulted by a group of males, and that they cut out her tongue to make sure that she could never tell anybody who did it to her, and then they smashed her hands so that she couldn't write it. Moore had found Clotho after this horrible encounter with these males and took her back to Rhys to help her. And in that moment, Rhys decided that his library was going to be a refuge for priestesses who were attacked and abused like her. So while they're in the library, they do a bunch of research and they find out a lot of information about the wall in these old books that Clotho left them. The problem is that a lot of the information about the wall in these books is contradictory to each other, so they don't know which one is correct and which one is not. But one thing that all of the books agreed upon is that the wall was never meant to be permanent. It was supposed to be a temporary solution while humans and fairies figured out how they can live together peacefully. While they're in the library, Feyre also tells Rhys that what she wants to do is go and find a way to release the Bone Carver and convince him to fight on their side in the war. Is this a good idea? We don't know. But it's the idea that she has. So they decide that Feyre and Cassian will go to the prison to talk to the Bone Carver, because if both of the High Lord and the High Lady go, it's gonna be a little bit too obvious that they're like super thirsty for his help and they don't want to show their ass like that. So Rhys brings Feyre and Cassian to the prison. Although he doesn't go in with them, he does bring them to the island. As they're hiking up the side of the mountain to get into the prison, Feyre asks Cassian some questions and he explains that the Bone Carver is actually an old god who used to be in charge and like presiding over everything before the magic of the world had transferred to the Cauldron and the High Fae. She tells Cassian that she thinks that Amren should be able to know how to free the Bone Carver since Amren was able to get herself out, and Cassian tells her that she should be very careful about that because Amren doesn't like to talk about that stuff at all. And Amren is a little bit testy and a little bit dangerous, so it's a little questionable. We walk into the Bone Carver's cell, and as we discussed last time, the Bone Carver can like make himself look however he wants to whoever is seeing him. So the Bone Carver that Cassian is seeing is not necessarily the same as the Bone Carver that Feyre is seeing. She sees him as the same little boy that she saw the first time they went there, but this time when she walks in, because the circumstances of her life are quite different now, she realizes that the little boy that he's in the form of is not just any little boy, but her future son with Rhysand. He's got Rhysand's face and her smile. And before she gets to start asking any questions, he says, "I smell my sister on you, Cursebreaker." And she finds out that the Carver's sister is the Weaver. He also tells Feyre that he knows about Nesta and that Nesta came out of the Cauldron with something that didn't belong to her and that she's something different now. And she tells him she thinks that she can free him and send him home. And he simply says, "I'm listening." And that, my friends, is where we leave off for today. I, again, unintentionally left us on a cliffhanger. Will the Carver work with them? Can the Carver even work with them? Is this a horrible mistake? Are they all gonna die at the hands of Hybern? Tune in for the next episode. Wow, I'm getting good at this. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think of this third book so far. Which character has developed into your favorite that maybe you weren't expecting? Personally, I am so glad that it seems like Lucien is going to get the deeper character development that he deserves, because if he had stayed at the Spring Court, I don't think we would have been able to see that. Also, I have to say that Nesta has grown on me. I absolutely couldn't stand her in the first book, but she's gotten a lot better. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know, do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you like her? Do you like Lucien? Do you still love Rhys? Sometimes in this book, I have to say that although I love Rhys to death, don't get me wrong, and we still stand, I sometimes think that he's a little bit too easy on Feyre. Please don't forget to leave a like on this video if you don't mind taking a second out of your day to do that, because I always appreciate it and it helps me tremendously, especially on different content like this. Helps me know that you guys want me to keep going. Don't forget to subscribe if you like this type of video or you just want to see my many makeup tutorials and reviews that come all the time. If you'd like to keep up with me between videos, I am at Ms. Quinface over on Instagram. I post behind the scenes on my Instagram story. I unbox my PR over there. We take polls on what we're going to be doing next here on this channel, and I would love to have you be part of that little crew as well. I also do some more creative makeup looks over there that don't always make their way to YouTube, so if you're into that, that's the place to find it. That is all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Get Ready with me, and I will see you in the next one.